In the 3 years of Got Somme being a wine podcast and being across socials and YouTube, by far the biggest question we get asked is, how to decant? Why to decant? And what is decanting? Well, consider this your masterclass.
Well, I can't miss that.
And with a Master Sommelier. It's a Master Sommelier class. It doesn't work that well. Carlos Santos has literally just lit a candle in the studio as we prepare to show you different ways to decant and across a whole different bunch of budgets. Literally, on this episode, you're going to hear you can decant into anything. Are you embarrassed about that story I'm going to tell, Carlos?
There was no other vessel for decanting, so we had to.
Wait to hear what we got up to in Tasmania. All on this episode of Got Somme. Carlos, you've just taken the cork out of a bottle of wine that we just bought. Now, my kind of instruction to you, and it was a very last-minute instruction, I'll give you credit, you were the first person in this wine store at 9 a.m, kind of rushing, but I asked you to get a bottle of wine that you think would benefit from decanting. Yep. So my question to you is, what is decanting and how does a wine benefit from it?
I mean, decanting is obviously passing the wine from the bottle, from the normal bottle it comes from, to a decanter, and that is for a few different reasons. One would be to aerate the wine if it needs, but also to separate sediment. You know how long over the years the wine starts creating some sediments and it sinks to the bottom of the bottle, and then that's obviously by decanting you separate them. Then of course, if you're in a restaurant, it looks pretty romantic too.
It does, especially when you're lighting candles. How cute.
Is in fact to see the sediment arriving to the neck of the bottle, then you stop decanting. So obviously, ideally you always store the bottle on a laid out position, right? We've said this a few times. So the wine is always in contact with the cork. When you take it off the shelf to decant, I mean, if you're in a restaurant, you don't have that time to leave the bottle standing for 6 or 7 hours or 24 hours. So
that
all
was
the
just
sediments.
To stop there. That's your sort of recommendation. So you're saying, most wines in fridges laying horizontal.
Yeah.
Now the sediment will be along the bottom side of that, along the length of the bottle towards the cork.
Correct.
But of course, you want the cork to stay in contact with the wine.
Absolutely.
If you keep it vertical, you don't get the benefits of it. So you're saying 6 to 7 hours would be sort of ideal for you to bring a bottle out of your wine fridge, place it vertically, standing up, so the sediment can then slowly go down.
Correct, exactly. Right. So the wine should always be in contact with the cork, but once you want to open the bottle, and if you have that time, that luxury of having that time at home, sure, leave the bottle for 6, 7 hours, 24 hours, even better, whatever. The wine standing, so all the sediment comes down to the bottom of the bottle. In the restaurant, you don't have time for that. So ideally, you will have a crate or cradle where the wine is, put on this position, laying down, and is just.
So the position is sort of like elevated slightly.
A little bit, yeah, just the same position as it was on the wall, more or less. So the sediment stays intact. So the sediment stays intact and it doesn't move anywhere from there. But then obviously you just have to work around the bottle this way and then just be very, very gentle and then move the wine into the decanter, obviously. So not perturbing the sediment. This is in restaurant. If we at home,
so you're talking about extensive wine lists where you can't get 1,000 bottles vertical ready for order.
No,
but when someone does order a wine,
that's right.
This is the process of trying to, maintain the wine in its best form, knowing that if you disrupt that sediment, it's going to take away some of the effect of the bottle.
It's not harmful at all. It's not harmful. It's not going to kill you. Otherwise, it wouldn't be there anyway, right? But it's just a little bit bitter or sandy, so it's not comfortable. You don't want to have that.
It's not a nice experience.
You could also filter the whole thing. So you see in some places they will put like a
coffee strainer sort of thing.
Exactly. And you just pour the whole wine in. But one is not elegant. If you're in a restaurant, if you're at home, sure, by all means, fine.
So we've got 3 different decanters in front of you. 2 are similar style, but in different variations of glass. And one is sort of a newer take on getting as much oxygen into wine as possible. I think it is called like a breath decanter. I've put it on our Got Somme Instagram a few times and have had varied response. Some people demanding where we got it so they could get their own, and others going, throw that in the bin. So what we're going to do today is we're going to decant it into 3 different styles and just see the different experience, but also get a bit of a Master Sommelier who's poured tens of thousands of bottles into decanters about your experience on what works best for you as a professional.
This one is a very regular decanter. This one, I'm not sure. Yeah, no, I don't think it's not a Riedel decanter. Usually the Riedel decanters have names. I'm not sure.
It does look like a kind of Riedel variation.
It does, yeah.
When you say regular decanter, that looks like it could be a vase for flowers.
It could be, yeah.
And the more kind of distracting aesthetic one is a long tube that goes down to the bottom and then has a kind of curls back over itself with a thinner end. If you want to put some pictures or video to that, we'll have it on our YouTube. So make sure you click the link below if you're listening to the podcast and take it to this moment. But Carlos, let's get into some decanting and we'll talk about best practices.
There's all different styles of decanters. Obviously, Riedel is really, really good at them. There's crystal decanters, there's glass decanters. So obviously all of them are a little bit different as well. But yeah, the regular, I think they actually probably even call it that. It's pretty good, and this is so versatile. It goes for whites, for reds. I like it for sparkling wine even. Yeah. So why decanting this bottle of wine? Because I picked a Cabernet Sauvignon from Bordeaux. So this is a wine that it's Cabernet Sauvignon, Cabernet Franc, Merlot. Typically allows for the wine to get a little bit of oxygenation and just open up much better. So what I will do now is, obviously, as I was saying, the sediment has been left to get to the bottom of the bottle. So now I will just very, very gently decant or move the wine from the bottle to the decanter and paying a close attention to the candle. So the candle is underneath. I can clearly see the candle through the wine, and what this is allowing me to do is to see the sediment arriving to the top of the bottle. But because we're not going to decant the whole bottle, we're just going to decant some part of the wine and then decant into the other bottle, into the other decanters as well. So we then can taste the difference. So decanter, I mean, this first decanter has some advantages, is that it's quite a large bowl.
They call this one the flower vase one.
But this one is just a beautiful bowl, so a lot of contact with oxygen, and then a gentle up, and then again an opening, so at the top. So yeah, this will allow for a good amount of oxygen. I think it's not too much, it's not too little. I think it's just really good. This one, on the other hand, will be a lot less oxygen. Because
when Carlos says this one, we are talking about the kind of extravagant loop.
Yes.
It looks like a Grand Prix circuit.
Correct. And what I'm doing is, again, paying attention to the candle, and I can clearly see the wine. So we'll just leave it at that.
Now, you want to talk about how you're a little bit nervous about this next one because you've never even used it.
Yeah, that's true.
So the next one is called like the Breather decanter. I actually bought one of these after seeing our great, he's not a friend, but I love the bloke, Tony's, or Thirsty Tony, or Tony's Thirsty. He uses this for Grange.
Oh, okay.
And Carlos has never used this, so he's a little bit nervous about how to do it. But basically, it's about adding a seal to a wine and then tipping it all upside down and letting the most amount of oxygen possible into the glass at any one time. I mean, it looks really good. As like a party trick.
One of these advantages already is that you cannot control the sediment.
Exactly. And so, is this where we talk about Wendouree?
Well, yes, you would have a lot of sediment on the Wendouree.
So to give some backstory and context, I had an occasion to open up a nice bottle of, I think it was 2003 Malbec Wendouree. One of Carlos's favourite Australian producers, and I opened it up in this very fast-breathing decanter, and I put it up on our Instagram and was met with a lot of vitriol, and also Carlos, I think you wrote, "No!" And it was true. As it was decanting, it was too late to stop, and I could see the sediment actually going along the edges of the wine. So it was like mixing it, basically like shaking a bottle of wine.
Yeah. So now, I mean, I think that's totally right. So the problem, I think this will be a very, very good decanter for, actually, you know what? This bottle of wine, there's no sediment whatsoever.
What year was the vintage?
It's 2021.
Yeah.
It's a young Bordeaux. It's not a top producer. It's not something that is meant to age for forever. I mean, it's $30 $30 or so bottle of wine.
Yep.
Cabernet Sauvignon, Cabernet Franc, Cabernet Sauvignon, Cabernet Franc, Merlot, etc. So a very classic Bordeaux blend. But this is, easy going. There's no fining, no filtration on the wine.
So we now have three different wines decanting, or wines in three different bottles decanting. This is a $37 bottle of wine.
Yeah.
It's a 2021 vintage, so it's young. It's a
Yes.
youthful wine. Where do you see wine benefiting from decanting?
Yeah.
Because my very limited knowledge of wine is the older the wine, the less oxygen
Yes.
it needs.
Yes.
So you would only decant that for a very small amount of
Yeah.
time, an hour
Yeah.
or less. A youthful bottle like this might benefit from what?
Yes.
4 hours, 6, 12, 24?
If we have a very old bottle of wine, you probably want to use a decanter more like this to start with.
So you are
because-
pointing to the Grand Prix style circuit.
Yes. Why? Because a very old bottle of wine does not need as much oxygen. This one will allow more oxygen. One is
So you're
the
saying that
contact-
because it's got smaller amounts of surface area, like the opening is a smaller surface area.
Correct. One is a smaller surface open area with oxygen, and then also is closer. Is doesn't allow for as much in and out of oxygen in the decanter. So for the old bottle of wine, this would be ideal. But then again, if you are having an old bottle of wine, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years of age, the wine is probably already mature enough and
It's already slowly had those increments through the cork
through
of
the cork, and it may be very, very sensitive, maybe very delicate. So if you are decanting it well in advance, a few hours in advance, you certainly will spoil the wine with oxygen too much, and then it will be oxidized. So then that's not good.
Because I think a lot of people who think just like they see decanting, they maybe spend a bit of money on a bottle and
Yes.
get an old bottle. They don't know much about wine, but they go, "Oh, I think we should put this into decanter," and then they leave it for 6 hours because that's what they probably think. The longer I've been told,
Yes.
the longer the better.
It depends. It depends on the wine. So if it's a 1980 Bordeaux, and even 1990s now, it's already 30 years.
Yeah.
So it's a long time, and some may hold very well, some may not.
Okay.
So I think it's case by case. My suggestion for very, very old bottles of wine is when you open, obviously be very, very gentle. And I cut the foil on this bottle, from the back upside down, so it's nice and straight like this. But then is also to see the full neck, because if you just cut the foil there, you cannot really see the sediment as properly.
Yeah.
So like this.
So
looks
taking
nice
off the full
nice and
foil
tidy.
of the top of
Yes.
the bottle
Yeah.
of wine, so that you can have as much
Yeah.
available
Yeah.
glass to look through with your candle.
Also because when you're just about to decant, if you take the full foil off, when you put the screw top or the corkscrew into the cork, because a very old bottle of wine, it will break little pieces. So by seeing the full cork on the bottle while you're decanting, you can see that you're not pushing it in, you can see that it's not breaking, and you can go a little faster or a little slower depending on the quality of the cork, right? And then go for decanting. But then again, old bottle of wine,
Old bottle of
very
wine
delicate.
needs less amounts of oxygen.
Yeah,
For
typically.
this is like not specific to each bottle, but it is a generic rule. And then so that's why you've got it. You would have it in a smaller opening and smaller surface area.
Correct.
And then our flower vase one.
Yes.
This might best suit a
Pretty
younger
much,
bottle. And how
yeah.
long would you have that open for? A 2021 Cab Sav that we've got here from Bordeaux. How long are you decanting that for to get to its optimal?
Not too long. I mean, like this particular bottle, 2021, I think it's more about have the feel of the wine. Also because every single bottle of wine is different. These are natural products. It comes in a natural cork. So there's evolution on every bottle in a different way. So it's really about opening the bottle, pour the glass yourself, and see how it feels in the glass first before decanting, because again, some bottle may evolve better than others. If you are having a big Shiraz, if you're having, a big Bordeaux from a big house, wine that is meant to age for 20, 30, 40 years, I mean, by all means, sure. Decant, if it's 40 years already age, be careful. Don't decant it too long in advance. Perhaps decant it just to separate the sediment right on time of serving. If it's 5 years old, 6 years old Bordeaux or the Penfolds Grange, for instance, that wine needs to be decanted. If it's very, very young, you probably want to decant it, and you probably want to have 6-7 hours of decanting. But then again, my suggestion, and I don't like to do it because I like to see the evolution of the wine. So I pour a glass, I see how it feels. If it feels very muted, if it's very tight, then okay, I will decant it. But my preference, and I will decant it to allow the wine oxygenate, but I keep sampling over and over again. If it keeps being muted and muted for longer, I just open something beside on the side and just keep enjoying the next bottle while the Penfolds Grange, for instance, is opening up. So
that is something you've spoken about early on in Got Somme, maybe in our first year, was that exact conversation. I do remember it. You said, as soon as you open a bottle, you'll try a wine, see how it is, and then you'll come back to it every hour to find out when it's expressing its best. And even very recently, as much as like 3 weeks ago, I did a bottle of Barolo, and I opened it up, poured myself a glass, assessed it. It did feel quite tight. It's a Barolo, you expect that. It was a younger wine. It was 2018, so it could have sat for another 10 plus years.
Yes.
And then I decanted it and then came back 5 hours later and it was a different wine.
Yes.
Much better for the decanting.
Yeah, there you go. So Barolo is one of those grape varieties, right?
But then I get to the one, the finer one, the breather, I think it is called, or something like that. I'll be corrected in the comments and happy to actually pin a comment and put the link to it.
Yeah.
But that one which, forces air into the wine, do you see any place for that in wine?
Well, younger wines that are fined and filtered, as opposed to what I said a little earlier. But fines and filtered wines that have no sediment on the bottle, white wines, etc., you can use. Because, again, if you are using a Penfolds Grange, or if you're using a Wendouree, or if you're using a old school Bordeaux, that have sediments on the bottle, if you use this, it will mix the sediment, and that defeats the purpose of decanting. So you're not using this decanter for old bottles of wine. For young wines, where sulfur was used to prevent oxidation, obviously, so the wine is fully protected. This will allow for that to evaporate, if you like, because it's a forced decanter, right? So that's good for those type of wines. You did mention something about double decanting earlier.
I do have a bunch of questions, and one of them is, I remember the wine animal came in, and one of his Brendan's wines that he bought in was a blind wine tasting of a Shiraz Viognier, and he had double decanted that.
Yeah.
Why, and what's the purpose?
Yeah, double decanting is just decanting twice, basically. You can double decant by putting the wine of the bottle in the decanter and then bring it back to the bottle.
So just like basically swooshing between glasses, essentially, but a bit more elegantly,
tack
back into the wine
back into the bottle. And that is just to really force, again, more oxygen into the wine. So
I think that was a sort of young wine from Syrah was the purpose of that. Yeah. It would benefit from a bit more oxygen because it hadn't had it naturally through the cork.
Well, look, again, as I say, I prefer to be very, very gentle with the wines. If I'm opening a very special bottle of wine, I take my time. The moment I buy the wine or the moment I put it off the cellar, I open it, I take a small sample, and I keep tasting it over and over again. When it's time to serve it, I either already had the wine decanted before or decanting on the time. So, but you need to manage how it feels for you. If it feels good, if it tastes good, then you probably won't need to decant. If you feel like the wine is not showing fruit, is not showing any aromas, any florals, any spices, then probably it's a little too muted, it's probably too close. And if it's 10-15-year-old wine, it's probably, needing that oxygen. It needs to run, it needs to open, right? So yeah, that's when decanting makes sense.
So an analogy between us is Carlos, Portuguese, handsome stallion, takes his time, lights candles, is delicate at the touch, and takes a long time to finish. And me, fast, quick, and easy. Get in there, get it done with this breathing decanter. Doesn't matter what it is. Finish it, go to bed.
Fair enough. Yeah,
We're still talking about wine.
Yes.
A couple of quick questions for you, Carlos.
It's not right or wrong.
How do you clean these bastards?
Yeah, so to clean these bastards...
It's funny when you say it.
I know.
How do you do it?
The best way is do not put hot water, because if you put in hot water, it will boil the tannins and it will stick even more to the decanter. So cold water is the best at first. Cold water, give it a really, really good shake. You can put soap. It's not ideal, but if you wash the decanter right after it's been used with cold water, and never ever try to put a cloth to dry inside the decanter because you cannot touch the whole surface of the decanter and it will make marks. So that's why sometimes you see these decanters.
Put a brush in there. Some people, a steel brush.
You put a brush, but a brush will only reach parts of the decanter. Is not touching the whole surface, and then it will be noticeable. So best thing is just cold water to the top, like, shake it
and let it dry.
And let it dry. And the outside, the same thing. After you use cold water, you can then use hot water because is already properly rinsed from tannins, and no cloth inside whatsoever, ever, because it will ruin the decanter because it will have marks on the neck because you can't reach the whole surface anyway.
I've got kids, so I have one of those little dry mats with all the hundreds of little things that you can meant to put like baby bottles on, and I just chuck stuff my decanter on it upside down.
That's the best.
Thank you, sir.
That's the best.
Quickly tell the story. We're in Tasmania.
Yes.
Devil's Corner flew us over there. We'd had a skinful of wine. I couldn't recognise my partner from about 20 metres away when we were approaching her at the hotel.
True.
And we had a couple of bottles of wine that we opened. And do you want to tell everyone what you decanted it in?
We had a rough day, I think, and we get to the hotel. We had a couple of bottles still to enjoy, and we thought that one needed decanting.
Yeah.
And yes, we use a kettle.
Use the hotel kettle.
Hotel kettle. He just has to breathe. I mean, he has to aerate because it smells very, very weird. This is a new modern style decanter. You can warm up the wine to your temperature.
Watching a Master Sommelier with an unplugged kettle on the veranda of this place in Bicheno, Tasmania, just swirling around with this thing that's just harboured many a tea bag. But that's the importance of decanting. It does have a place. It doesn't matter what you have, like we said, across all budgets. Essentially, this could be, it is specifically for wine, but it does look like a flower vase, so don't get too particular on it. Use what you have at home, use it wisely, and test it. Use, bottles that are affordable, and then build yourself up to getting a bit of skill to recognise the best timings of how to decant.
Yeah, exactly. What feels best, what feels good, what doesn't feel good.
If you have any questions on decanting, if you're watching this on YouTube, then leave them below. We will reply to you. If you're watching this on Instagram, then head over and we will reply to your comment there. Thank you very much for a Master Sommelier class on decanting and listening to this episode of Got Somme. If you're not subscribed to this podcast or this YouTube channel, please consider subscribing. We release every second week. We've got some ripping content on the way in 2024 and beyond. So thank you very much for being here. Thanks for making it to the end, and we'll see you on the next episode.